Hi, everyone. My name is Sandy Crashel, and I'm part of the ISTLC team, and we are so pleased that you're joining us today. We are excited about today's presentation about 4+ programming in Iowa with Kim Drew and Kirsten Lane, both representing the Iowa Department of Education. I'll be your host for today's webinar with Amy Diesenberg-Wines, and we will try to cover any technical difficulties that arise here. If you do run into any problems on your end, please connect with us either through the chat box or by emailing us at iowastlc@gmail.com. That's iowastlc@gmail.com. And we'll try to remediate any problems that are arising. Before we get started on this afternoon's topic, just a few housekeeping issues. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the Iowa Secondary Transition Learning Community website. A link to the site was sent to everybody on the distribution list earlier, and we'll also include it in the chat box today. All webinars are recorded and archived on the website with resources and support materials, so we encourage you to save the link for future use. Just as a reminder, closed captioning can be provided if needed for any of the webinars that we host. Just make sure that you email those requests to the Iowa STLC Gmail account at least a week before the session. In order to ensure that everyone can clearly hear the presenters and to avoid any technical difficulties, we have muted everyone, so please be sure to share your questions through the chat feature of Zoom. And Amy or I will make sure we help field those questions so that Kim and Kirsten will have them. So with that, we'll hand off today's webinar to Kim and Kirsten.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Lane. I'm with the Iowa Department of Education and Secondary Transition. I want to check and make sure that everybody can hear us now. All right, sounds like it's good. Thank you. Sorry about that issue. I'm here with Kim Drew.
I'm Kim Drew with the Department of Ed. I do a little bit of secondary transition, a little bit of family educator partnership, and other duties as assigned.
So we're going to share with you today some information about 4+ services. Some of it will be a review, but we're also going to share some new information from a recent review of 4+ community college programs. So with that, we'll get started on just some transition basics. The basics that I am going to be sharing, there we go, are the transition basics that we use for all students who are age 14 and older, or younger if we start transition planning before 14 for students. But we're going to be looking at them today through the lens of 4+ planning. So this should not be new information to any of you, but when you think about it today, I want you to think about it specifically about with those students in mind that might be attending school beyond that typical graduation age or that typical after those typical 4 years. So as with all transition planning, it's based on age-appropriate transition assessments. So what that means is that we know that as a student ages, the depth and the nature of their assessments increases. And that will be true with a student who is going to be in 4+ programming, that those assessments should be ever more focused on secondary expectation and the really specific needs that they have to exit school and enter post-secondary environments. This planning should not wait until that senior year. We should be looking early on as to what that student might need and if a student might be considering 4+ programming. The needs are addressed in a lot of different ways and can be addressed in many different locations. Just as in a high school setting, that's true with a 4+ setting. So just because a school has a 4+ program does not mean that a student's entitled to that 4+ program, or that in fact that 4+ program is the best place to meet the student's needs. So really looking at what all of the options are and what the best way of meeting that student's needs is critical. So quality transition IEP includes those transition assessments and then goals and services for each of the areas of living, learning, and working, unless we've documented that there's not a need. And that documentation comes through assessment. So really looking at those post-secondary environments and what those post-secondary expectations look for those environments. Looking at the post-secondary expectation for each student and what the expectations in those environments are, and determining whether or not there's a gap in skills for that student. So really, based on their post-secondary expectations, if there is not a need, you don't have to have those kinds of services. If there is, they're required. That course of study does not stop once a student has met their district's graduation requirements. We still need to address, if they're in 4+, what kind of course of study, what are they going to be learning, what classes are they going to be taking, what instruction are they going to be receiving, what services will they have. And it's critical to continue to look at linkages. As they get closer and closer to that post-secondary environment, we need to ensure that they are connected with whatever services they might need after high school. And then the plan for data collection and progress monitoring that does not stop when they enter a 4+ program. The transition assessments should include information about the student from multiple sources. So just as in high school, the student, the family, teachers, but you also might be looking at post-secondary environments again when you're doing assessment with a student who's in 4+. You might include teachers from the 4+ programming. Again, those assessments can be formal or informal and can involve community partners as well. The transition assessments, and this is really critical when we're looking at 4+ as a student is getting so much closer to that next environment. These assessments should be really targeted to inform those goals and services that will connect that student to and prepare them for their post-secondary expectations. And it'll assist in the development of those transition services. All of the decisions that happen, just as in grades 9 through 12, around 4+ programming, are made by the IEP team. So if a team determines that a student needs continued services beyond their 4 years of high school, and they determine what that placement will be and where those needs will be met, that becomes the decision of the IEP team. It can't be changed, it can't be reversed, it can't be modified without another IEP meeting. Those decisions then are documented through PWN or prior written notice, and the IEP then is developed and implemented as written. An IEP team must use the following to inform the need for 4+ services. So again, this is a review. This is what you're doing with your students who are in grades 9 through 12. But the focus changes as a student moves to 4+. So when you're thinking about that movement from 9 through 12 to 4+, make sure that that present level of performance is clear about what the student currently can do, what their post-secondary expectations are, and the assessments that inform those to develop a course of study, the services, and the plans for that student.
Okay, so I'm going to take it from here and talk a little bit more specifically about 4+ programming and when the use of the 4+ program on a college campus should be considered. Primarily, there's 3 reasons why this is going to happen, and that would be that the student's planning to go to college, but because of the way that they learn or the fact that they have difficulty generalizing skills, they might need time in that actual environment in order to learn how to be successful. Another reason might be that the student's going to go on to college, but they need study and accommodation skills in the actual setting, not just someone talking to them about what that might look like, but actually practicing those things within that setting. And then the third reason could be that the student might not be successful independently in college, but with support, they can gain the career and technical skills that could provide for a stronger employment outcome. So the thing to keep in mind here is that the intent of 4+ programs is to provide LEAs with additional options for meeting the students' needs so that we make sure that they are receiving FAPE. As Kirsten said, these programs are not the right fit for every student, and they need to be considered as for each individual student as that student comes to that age. So what's good for Johnny might not be good for Susie, which might not be good for Bobby. So it's really all about the individualized programming that's happened all the way through while a student has had an IEP. There are 9 different programs across the state. I have them listed there, the name of the community college where they are located, as well as which AEA they fall into. You will notice that there are 9 programs, but there are only 6 AEAs that are covered. So for example, if you have a student from Central Rivers AEA, then there's not a program in Central Rivers. So it's going to need to be the IEP team taking a look at what things that student might need and which program would best fit those students' needs. Most often, the similar services and opportunities are offered at all of the programs. So to send a student, for example, from Sioux City across the state to Kirkwood probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense by and large when there is a program already in that area. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. Maybe for some reason Kirkwood has a specific thing not offered at Success, then that could be considered, but primarily you're going to keep the student as close to home and to their home area as possible. But it's not out of the realm. And again, that's an IEP team decision as to where that student would attend and what program they would attend. This next slide, if any of you listened to my webinar years ago, this really hasn't changed. This is a definition and a review of what 4+ services are. They are secondary services. They are intended to fulfill unmet needs that have been identified in the student's IEP. They're provided through the district's continuum of services. And 4+ services can happen in a variety of settings, as Kirsten said earlier. Could happen at the high school, could happen at another location within the district. It could be something that happens in the community, or it could happen on a community college campus. Again, no one right answer for all students. So what we did here was we tried to make it a little more real. And so I have 3 different scenarios here. I have a living scenario, learning scenario, and a working scenario to just kind of help people think through some different ideas and thoughts. So if we're thinking about a student who has unmet needs in the area of living, maybe they need assistance in independent living skills or taking care of their personal hygiene, then we need to stop. Okay, so we've defined where their need is in the area of living. And then as an IEP team, we're going to sit down and say, where can these needs be met? Well, maybe the LEA has the ability to provide specially designed instruction to assist the student in obtaining these skills right there within the district. Maybe the IEP team says, you know what, there's a 4+ program on a community college campus. Maybe they have assistance that could be provided to the student in a dorm situation. Or maybe there is a supported community living option in the community where the student's going to live after they get done with school. So the IEP team takes a look at all of the different options and available opportunities for that student, and then they make the decision that best fits the situation. They don't come into the IEP team or into the IEP meeting with a decision already made. So you need to consider all of those things. So there's an example of living. For learning, maybe the student has an unmet need in an academic area, reading, math, whatever that might be. Again, those needs could be met at the LEA level. Maybe they could provide additional academic instruction in SDI, or maybe that need could be met in a 4+ program on a community college campus for one of the reasons that we stated earlier. Again, the IEP team looks at all of those different things and determines the best place for that student. And finally, if the student has unmet needs in the areas of working or employment, again, several different thought processes here. The LEA might be able to provide work experience services. The 4+ program might be able to provide training related to the career that the student is hoping to get into once they are finished with school. Or the school district could contract, with ACRP, or they can connect with voc rehab, which actually should have already happened as part of pre-eds and all of those things that were going on in high school. This could just be a continuation of those services. And once again, the IEP team is going to look at all of those different options, and they're going to say, you know what, for Johnny, I think this is the best way that we can meet that student. Okay, so this slide talks about what 4+ services are not, because there's a lot of discussion and a lot of confusion about what are they, what aren't they. So a few slides ago, I listed what those things are. This is what these things are not. They're not college programs. They're not only located on a college or community college campus. They're not decisions that are based on one person. As we said before, it's an IEP team decision. These services cannot be provided to students who have graduated. Keep in mind, we've had lots of conversations over the years about the difference between a student taking part in the graduation festivities or ceremonies and all of those things, and what the difference is between that and between accepting a diploma. Because once that student takes a signed diploma from the school district, that exits them from special education services and from public education. So if they have done that, they're not going to be in a 4+ program. They're going to go to a college program, a post-secondary program. 4+ services are not provided for a predetermined length of time, just because the physical therapy assistant program is a 2-year program. Susie doesn't go into this 4+ program saying automatically she's going for 2 years. That's not how this works. If Susie's needs are met and her transition needs have been worked through after the first semester, then she can graduate at that time and continue with the program. It just won't be under the 4+ umbrella. It would just be through the community. So, and then as the last bullet here is that these services are not provided for the purpose of earning a post-secondary credit, a certificate, or a degree. There's been a lot of conversation about that over the years, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that for these services are provided to the students who need them for as long as they need them, but not any less and not any more. Okay. Okay. So as we've said, the responsibilities for the 4+ programs really belong to the LEA by and large, because 4+ services are part of the district's secondary program. It's one of the offerings on the continuum of services that are part of secondary programs. So they're IEP driven. So as I said earlier, the student can't graduate before they receive these services. The LEA continues to have a responsibility for the IEP. They are the legal owner, if you will, of that document. And so it's important that they make sure that all of the various things that are important to ensure FAPE are being addressed. And that means that the IEP is comprehensive, that it's individualized, being based on the student's needs and post-secondary expectations, and that progress monitoring and data collection are being adhered to as they are outlined in the student's IEP. this is kind of the point I made earlier. The 4+ services are provided when the student needs them, for as long as the student needs them, and as long as the student is eligible for special education services. The financial implications for the LEA, as I said, it's just one of the many options of the district secondary program. It's up to the LEA to ensure that the IEP is completed and appropriately implemented. The IEP team determines the goals and services. It's not appropriate for the IEP to change to fit a program. And it's not appropriate to change the student's financial weighting based on the service costs of the program. The cost of books, supplies, and other materials to provide the FAPE must be covered by the district. Once the district purchases those things, the district owns those things. So if the district buys tools for someone to take part in an auto mechanics program, those tools belong to the district at the end of that. Now, it could be that the district is willing to sell those to the individual after the fact, but for the most part, the district owns them because they have paid for them. General supplies are the responsibility of the student, same for students without disabilities. When a student goes to school, it's not the district's responsibility to buy their paper and their pens and their pencils, and if they're living in the dorm, their toilet paper and all of those kinds of things. That would be the same for any student without a disability. So that's not any different. The district has the responsibility for the transportation to the location of the program, unless if the student is open enrolled, then the home district would own that financial piece. Districts can offer to or opt to cover the living costs for a student on campus for those programs that offer that, if they determine that it is more cost effective for them than providing transportation. Again, district decision. District can decide, you know what, it's better for us to drive that student back and forth every day, or you know what, that's going to take a lot of time and resources. It makes more sense for us to pay for the student to live on campus as opposed to us driving the student back and forth every day. If the student disagrees with the decision, I would assume that that's going to fall back on the student. If the student, so if the district says, we'll drive you every day, and the student says, no, I want to live on campus, that's their choice, and then they would pay for it. Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that. So residential costs, if they're applicable, this is what we've said. It's a living on campus, as Kirsten said, it's a student choice and parent cost with keeping in mind these two exceptions. There's specially designed instruction related to living skills are necessary, and they're included in the IEP necessary to provide FAPE. Then the district would own those costs. Or if the district determines that the program is too far away from home for the student to go back and forth every day, then it is up to the district to go ahead and pay for those residential costs. So as far as the, yes, Amy.
There's a question, is there any maximum distance for day-to-day transportation?
The question was, is there any maximum distance day-to-day for transportation? No, because that's totally a district decision. The district could determine that 10 miles back and forth every day is too far, where another district might decide that it's okay to drive 75 miles each day. That's really up to the district to figure out what their cost is and how they want to approach that.
Thank you.
Yep. The responsibility of the 4+ service providers. I know there are several of you on here. Welcome to you. I saw Mike and Jen on there. I don't know who else is here, but anyway, the responsibility as far as the 4+ goes, you guys need, part of your job is to ensure that individualized students' IEPs are implemented as they are written, including services, supports, linkages, goals, all of those things. It's up to you guys to notify the IEP team if you have concerns. Maybe the goals that were written in the spring for a student seemed logical and they seem to match up with transition assessments in the spring, but then the student gets on campus and you guys at the community college are concerned about some things that you're seeing. It's going to be up to you to call the IEP team together and bring those concerns forward, and then as a team figure out how that's going to look going forward.
We have another question regarding what about transportation costs to a clinical experience if that's part of their course of study?
A work experience, a clinical, it could be any, but if that's a part of their IEP, then the district would provide that. Yeah, if that is a part of their IEP and needed to provide FAPE, then yes, they would provide, the district would need to provide transportation or provide the means for the transportation. So I know of programs where students are involved in work experience, not on a community college campus, but involved in work experience, and the district either provides transportation, provides a bus pass and training, provides some form of transportation for them to be able to do that experience.
I'm going to apologize for the blank look on my face. It was the clinical word. I went like to a medical model, and I was like, wait a minute. So I apologize for that. The 4+ service providers need to ensure that progress monitoring is being documented as it's outlined in the IEP. I know how crazy things can get sometimes, but if the IEP states that progress monitoring will be included in the paperwork once a month, it needs to be sure that it is there and it's up to date. And then I know this varies a little bit depending on the AEA and the program, but as much as possible, it's important for the 4+ folks to take part on the IEP team so that not every district will have a real good sense of what those programs look like, and you guys being there to help them understand the differences between the high school environment and the community college environment will help the goals and things be more realistic and advantageous to the student. Okay, so these next several slides are going to talk about when we did the desk audit. Gosh, it's been almost a year ago now. I can't even believe that. But what we did was we did a sample of, we reviewed a sample of IEPs across all 9 of the programs. And the next several slides are going to talk about things that we ran into. Some of them happened at multiple programs, some of them happened at one program, but these are the things that I would like all of you, when you're taking part in IEP teams and discussions and so on and so forth, these are the things that I would like you to keep in mind. And if you see these things popping up, it would be incredibly helpful if you guys could say, time out here a minute, I was on this webinar and they talked about this and I want to fix this. So these are the things that we'd like you guys to be aware of and pay attention to. So one of the things we ran into was that the IEPs didn't always appear to be individualized. For example, all of the students in a program had the same testing and classroom accommodations, or all of the students had the same number of SDI minutes, or all of the students were receiving tutoring. And let me just tell you that for me, that was a bit of a red flag, because if kids are coming from 10 different school districts, they all land in one program, and then amazingly, all of these things are the same. That's highly unlikely to have happened just by chance. So pay attention to that for me. Linkages to support transition to the next environment were missing or hard to connect. So if the student had a need, for example, in the area of employment, but VR didn't seem to be involved with that student, that's a problem. Number one, they should have been involved on the pre-ETS level and then been handed off to whoever the VR counselor is in that next environment. But if there's not documentation to state that, then it makes it feel like those connections are not being made. That might not be the truth, but it's important to have that documentation within the IEP because then we know it's happening. Progress monitoring data was not necessarily as it was outlined. There were some times where a rubric was referred to as a way to monitor progress, but we couldn't find that rubric as part of the documentation in the IEP system. Sometimes a need was stated in the check boxes for living, learning, or working. But then when we got to the services, supports, goals, activities, then there were, for example, maybe it said that academics was a concern, but there was nothing in the goals, the services, supports, or whatever to indicate how that goal, that need was going to be addressed. Some additional IEP concerns that we ran into were that changes were made to goals or services, but there was really no explanation of why that happened. There were some other things where it looked like accommodations and things may have been put into a student's IEP when they were in 5th grade or 7th grade or whatever, but it didn't look like there had been any updates with relation to what things might be acceptable at that next level. We all know that the accommodations and modifications that are available in a high school are very different from what are available on a college campus. There's typically about 3 or 4 things you can have on a college campus. And oftentimes there's a much more extensive list on a student's IEP when they're in the public setting. So this last one is just a reiteration of what we had said before about room and board being provided without either a documented need of a living role or documentation that the district basically said, you know what, we're going to do that, we're going to pay for this because it's too far away from our district and we think this is the best way to meet them. The other things besides reviewing IEPs that we did when we did this desk audit is we reviewed the contracts between the 4+ programs and the school districts. We also reviewed the invoices that were sent to the school districts to pay for the services and supports. So these next several slides talk about that. The contract related concerns that we ran into was in a couple of places there were no student names listed on the contract. Now, one thing that we came to over time was if you have 3 students, excuse me, you have 3 students from one school district, that can be one contract, but all 3 students' names need to be listed, and that's totally fine. You don't need 3 separate contracts if the kids are all participating in the same program. And then there needs to be items that are specific to a program. For example, if there are purchase services, you need to have those, the detail behind, why is this service being purchased or who is this service being purchased for? What does that look like? There is a link here to the sample contract that the department issued back in 2017, the first round of this information. Your district does not have to use that contract, but if you choose to do that, you'll make sure that everything that you need is included. Yes, ma'am. Question?
Your screen changed slightly. It's showing the chat box for participants now.
Okay, this contract checklist here on this is not anything that has to be turned in to the department. This is just a way, if you want to give this to whoever draws up the contracts at your district, if your district is choosing not to use the one supplied by the department, if you just make sure the person writing the contract ensures that these things are included, you'll have everything that you need to meet the status quo for that contract. So again, doesn't have to be turned in. This was just, I like check boxes. I like to check things and cross things off, it makes me feel like I've accomplished things. So I guess it's just the way I think. So I thought other people should think like I do. You really probably don't want to know. Question.
Somebody shared that they couldn't click on the contract, it didn't come up. Is that because you will download the present? Is it a hot link in your presentation?
It is a hot link.
So the reason you're not able to access the hot link is because we're looking at Kim's presentation, but when you download the PowerPoint presentation, the hot link will work.
And if that is not the case, I've tested it several times. It doesn't mean that means that it works. But if for some reason it doesn't, please let me know. Or I can get Sandy to upload that document just in and of itself on the website, so you have it.
We'll be glad to do that, Kim. There's another question. Does the 4+ program or the district write the contract?
District.
Thank you.
The district writes the contract because they are contracting with the 4+ program to provide those services.
Unless the district is doing it themselves. That's only if there
Yes.
is a third party involved.
Yes. Thank you. All right. The invoice related concerns, these are just really basic. Oftentimes we ran into something that just said professional costs, and this is really going to be your business office people are the ones that are going to want to know this. Probably no one on this webinar does this really apply to, but it will allow you to share this information with your business office. So the professional cost, and this is more for the 4+ program because they're the ones that issue the invoice to the district in order to receive payment. So the professional costs need to show the breakdown of the cost for salary and benefits of the staff at the 4+ program. So if, for example, if you use professional costs as your heading and that's how your business office does it, if they can provide an additional breakdown, an additional document to the district that shows what's included in professional costs, that will do everything that needs to happen. And then that's kind of what the second bullet is, just reiterating that same thing. And again, my fact that I like checkboxes, here's another checklist for you. So you can utilize it or not. But again, it is just nothing that has to be turned in. But if you make sure that these things are on the invoice that is sent to the district, you will have done your due diligence and the districts will be able to pay those invoices without any. As a reminder, the state guidance document and webinar from January, either January or February of 2017 can be found at that hot link. Once again, once you download the presentation, and that's also on the Department of Ed website under state guidance, I believe, and it's 4+ services and so on. But that is a hot link that will get you back to that webinar if you want to review any of that information, because it really has not changed. This is just a little more expanded version and an explanation of some of the different things that we found when we did the assessment. And with that, we will take any other questions that you have. I hope that this has given you a little bit more information and a little more clarity to 4+ services.
If you have any additional questions or comments, could you please just put it in the chat box? We have a new question that came in that says, does a 4+ program count against your graduation rate?
We report graduation rates in 4-year and 5-year cohorts. That is something that we have to report for federal reporting. So that will absolutely does impact your graduation rate. We are looking at, though, if there might be a way that we can report within the state, and inclusive reporting of students that are in 4+ programs, so that is reflected, but still our graduation rate that's reported federally is impacted by it.
But only if students would go for 2 years. If they would attend a 4+ program for 1 year, they would be included in the 5-year
Right,
cohort. But if they went for a second year, that would hit a 6-year, and that would impact the graduation.
Kim and Kirsten, we have one more question. When should the 4+ program coordinator be invited to the IEP meetings?
That's very dependent. It's different from AEA to AEA. So I would say, number one, you need to have that conversation at your AEA. Because each AEA is handling that a little bit differently. And I know that just from some conversations that we have had, so I can't really give you a hard and fast answer other than to say, check with the special ed director at the AEA where you reside.
No, I guess the only thing that I would say is that it's just really important for the IEP teams to be considering the needs of the students and the different ways that the services can be provided. And 4+ programming should always be a consideration. And when you consider 4+ programming, you're considering a lot of different options, not just a program. And I think that as IEP teams, we try to be really cautious, or should be being really cautious about ensuring that we're considering all of the options, which is why I know there are sometimes questions about whether or not or when an outside entity should be involved in the planning process.
Thanks, Kirsten and Kim. A question that came in is, will the PowerPoint be sent out to us as a reference so we can access the links? What we will do is send out a follow-up email, as we typically do after each of the webinars, including a link to our Iowa STLC website. And that link was included in the chat box at the beginning of our session today as well. And from that link, you'll be able to find a recording of today's webinar, as well as the supporting documents that were referenced in the hot link, and a copy of the PowerPoint slides that should have live links in them. So as soon as that's available, that we'll be sending that email out to you. I would say probably within a couple of weeks at the most.
And please make sure that you are sharing this information at your AEA level. If there were folks that were unable to attend, please make sure that they have the link so that they can review the slides and listen to the recording and so on and so forth. And as always, you are more than welcome to email either myself or Kirsten if you have questions, if walking away from this, if something else occurs to you that you didn't think to ask, please don't hesitate to let us know. And we will be certain to get back to you with those answers.
One more question has come up, actually a couple. One is asking if we'll repost the link, and Amy is taking care of that. So within short order, that will be in the chat box again, and you should be able to copy it from there, I believe. The other question for the two of you wonderful women today is, what oversight does the AEA have of, you know what, it just jumped. So I'm going to scroll up to it. There we go. What oversight does the AEA have of 4+ programs? Why do they determine participation in the IEP meetings?
AEAs determine procedure. There's state guidance and then AEA implementation of state guidance around IEP procedures. So each AEA does have a little bit different process in how they implement the state guidance around IEPs. So I don't know if that answers the question. Is there anything you would add to that?
My guess would be it probably doesn't answer it in quite as black and white terms as you would like it to be. But if any of you ever have heard Thomas May's talk, it's kind of one of those things that you say, it all depends. And that's really where this falls out. There are some questions yet to be determined as to what this audit process, desk audit process, will look like going forward. Those things are still being determined, whether we will do this on once every other year basis. Will we do it every 3 years? Well, I can't answer that yet. This was just kind of our first foray into trying to understand what these programs look like and across the state, because in all honesty, these 9 programs are very much like the 9 AEAs in that each program approaches the 4+ services in a little bit different way. And it's not up to us at the DE to tell you exactly step by step by step by step, but it is up to us to ensure that if districts are paying for 4+ services on a community college campus, that the things that the district is paying for, which includes ensuring FAPE for secondary students, that those things are happening. Otherwise, we have not done our work as being the provider of guidance and supervision.
Okay, another question. I'm not exactly sure how you'll be able to answer this, but here's the question. To sum up a prime 4+ student, what would it be?
Oh, can't answer that.
Nope.
Well, I can answer it generally. I can answer it. I'm going to go back to the guidance at the beginning of this session, and you look at the post-secondary expectations for the student. Where do they see themselves? What does the IEP team see as an outcome for living, learning, and working for those students? And what do they need skill-wise to be able to reach those post-secondary expectations? If there are gaps that are required, that the IEP I just lost my words on that.
If there are unmet transition needs that the IEP team determines are necessary for the student to meet their post-secondary expectations, then this might be, then 4+ services, and I'm going to emphasize services, should be considered. Where those services take place, that's a secondary conversation to what those things look like. And I would caution people to think about, for any of us who have had a student graduate from high school and go on to college, every single 18-year-old I have ever met with a disability or without a disability has some needs when they go to college at the beginning. So it's up to us to determine, is their disability part of the reason this is a problem? Or is it just the fact that they're 18 and going off on their own for the first time? So it's a really tenuous balancing act to ensure that we're doing this for the right reasons and not keeping anybody out because we don't think it's right, or not putting kids in just because they want to, or just because they want to have a college experience. So it's definitely, we said it again and again, it's the IEP team's decision, and it needs to be based on individual needs and the IEP team determining where those needs can best be met.
A question came in that says, ideally, when should that conversation happen?
All of this conversation, in my opinion, and Kirsten can jump in, transition planning begins when kids are 14. So you start the conversation then. when I was working in a high school. That's what I always did with my freshmen. Where do you see yourself? When you get done at this high school, where do you see yourself? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And you have that conversation every year throughout high school. Most 14-year-olds don't really know. They're shooting darts. A lot of 18-year-olds don't really know, but let me just tell you that sometimes I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, and here I am. So those answers are going to continue to change, but the conversation needs to continue. And by having those continued conversations, you can adapt and change. And as you learn more about the student, as you have those, that more information through transition assessments, all of those things will become better and better, and you'll have a better idea of what that should look like.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add as a part of those conversations, it's really critical to have that good transition assessment. Really looking at what are the gaps? What skills does the student have? What skills will the student need? And how, what's needed? What services, what instruction, what linkages, what are the things that are needed to help them meet the expectations of that next environment. I can't stress enough how important transition assessment is, good transition assessment to making these decisions.
We so appreciate all the great questions and the comments. One comment that has been shared for us to just let everybody know is that the Iowa Educational Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired also has a 4+ program that's located on the ISD campus in Council Bluffs. So we're just adding that. There's also one more question. Amy, did you get that?
Yes, would a student with guardianship be a candidate for 4+ services at a community college living in a dorm setting? Outside agency supports may not be allowed in dorm settings due to FERPA. Would you like me to repeat that?
No, I think I got enough of it. I think that is going to be it's such a very specific question. I would want to take that to the special ed director at your AEA, have local conversations. Could be a conversation, with even your school district's attorney. I would be afraid that if I gave you an answer, I would goof it up. So I would just say have those conversations on a more local basis where you could share even more detail behind that.
Yeah, and I guess I would just encourage all of us to remember that community colleges aren't the only place that a 4+ program or 4+ services can be provided. So, it might be that the student could attend, and again, without knowing the specifics of the situation in either the college setting or the student's skills and needs, but that maybe they have some classes in the college setting, but they don't live in the dorm, or maybe they don't go to the college setting. Maybe there's another setting that can best meet their needs. And again, you have to look at the individual student. Yeah.
I would add too that colleges provide reasonable and appropriate accommodations as well for students. So if it's appropriate, you would work also, if that was a request, with the college and work with them on needed accommodations, which can apply to housing as well.
And I think in addition to that, one of the things that should be happening on 4+ or in 4+ programs that are happening on community college campuses is the connection to disability services on that community college campus. So when the student is done with 4+ services, they already have the connection, the relationship, the knowledge of what it looks like to work with disability services, and not necessarily just with the folks in the 4+.
Last call. Any more questions or comments
It's
today?
blinking at us. Someone's asking something.
It's not here yet on mine. Do you have anything, Amy?
Joan, it might be specific to you though.
Okay.
Maybe I'm gonna send it to everybody.
Well, there is a question to everyone. Will case studies be provided as examples moving forward? IVRS had some working sessions with our local AEA in Burlington to understand IEPs, transition language, etc., and it was super helpful.
That's something we can certainly take a look at. I'm not going to make any promises at this point in time, but it's something that we can certainly consider.
Thanks, Kim. All right, now turn my mic off. Any other comments, Kim or Kirsten?
I don't have any.
I don't either. We want to thank you guys for joining. We hope that the information that we've shared has been helpful to you guys. And just know, as I said previously, if you need to reach out to us for more information, please feel free to do so. But much of the information that you will probably need related to more specifics will probably come from the folks at your AEAs.
We had one last comment shared that the examples might be best coming from various AEAs.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Our next
I think your microphone is on mute. We can't hear you right now.
There you go.
Okay, just a little technical snafu. Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much. So let's start from the top on this. We thank you for being with us today. The next two webinars from the Iowa Secondary Transition Learning Community will address the role of technology in transition. And this is a two-part presentation scheduled for Tuesday, the 7th of April and Tuesday, May 12th. More information and registration links for those two webinar sessions will be coming your way soon. Please remember, as Kim indicated to you, if you have any questions or comments regarding the webinars, today's webinar specifically, you can connect with either Kim or Kirsten through the Department of Education. Check with your local AEAs. And if there are questions or concerns, suggestions for the webinar series from the Iowa Secondary Transition Learning Community, please make sure you send us an email at the ISTLC Gmail site.
Can you share the upcoming dates again, please, Sandy?
Yes, upcoming dates again are Tuesday, April 7th and Tuesday, May 12th. And both of these sessions will be looking at technology in transition. So looks like we've got a couple of chats, unless Amy, you've addressed those already. Yep. Okay. Well, great. We hope you have a lovely evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you in April. Thank you.